December 1940. London sinks into a freezing night, and the sky, torn by flames, throws sparks above a city that refuses to kneel. Sirens wail, glass quivers, shelters overflow. In the tunnels of the underground, hundreds of pale faces wait for the earth to stop shaking. Outside, the German bombers pour fire on Britain. On the map of the world, the British Empire still shines wide, a pink stain covering oceans and continents. Yet behind the heavy doors of the war rooms in Whitehall, a darker truth burns hotter than any bomb. The Empire bleeds, not from a wound of flesh, but from its very core. Deep beneath the streets, inside the secret maze of bunkers, Winston Churchill bends over his desk to write a letter that will seal the fate of his nation. The pen trembles, his jaw tightens. The same man whose voice stirs the free world must now beg. Behind the noble phrasing of his pen lies a confession too heavy to speak aloud. The banker of the 19th century is bankrupt. Only a few years earlier, the City of London had been the beating heart of world finance. British money ran railways in Argentina, mined copper in Chile, and owned factories across America. But the war has changed the rules. It devours steel, oil, rubber, aluminum, materials consumed faster than any pre-war calculation could imagine. And Britain, an island without raw wealth, must import everything. While the Luftwaffe pounds Liverpool and Coventry to dust, another battle begins, the Battle of Accounts. In the ledgers of the Bank of England, the numbers collapse like bombed-out walls. Every cannon, every plane, every bullet costs more than the last. The national treasury melts under the heat of total war. Across the Atlantic lies the only reservoir of hope. America, vast, untouched, prosperous, and bound by neutrality. Its public, scarred by the Great War, wants nothing more to do with European deaths. Congress has passed the Neutrality Acts with a firm clause: cash and carry. Weapons may be sold to belligerents, but only for cash, and they must be carried away in their own ships. No loans, no credit, no exceptions. So British freighters steam out of New York, holds packed with shells and rifles, every box paid for in gold, every shipment negotiated to the last dollar. The reserves thin, then vanish. In a covert operation known as Operation Fish, Britain sends its entire treasure across the ocean. Warships and liners cross the submarine-infested Atlantic, their vaults heavy with thousands of gold bars and securities. Never before has such a fortune sailed the seas. The ancient wealth of the empire flees to the cold vaults of Canada, its exile bought with desperation. By the end of 1940, the truth is stark. The gold is gone, the liquid cash exhausted. The purchasing commission in Washington holds contracts it can no longer sign. Churchill, surrounded by smoke and maps, makes his decision. He must write to Franklin Roosevelt. The letter explains the war's strategic peril, the submarines, the relentless raids, the crumbling supply lines. But beneath the words hides an ultimatum. Without dollars, Britain dies. Without ammunition, there will be no fight left to wage. In Washington, Roosevelt reads and understands. If Britain falls, the fire will cross the ocean. Yet politics bind his hands. The American people refuse the idea of charity. Congress forbids gifts. If he wishes to save his ally, he must disguise generosity as business. From that paradox, Lend-Lease is born, a clever illusion of fairness. Roosevelt presents it simply. When your neighbor's house is on fire, you lend him a hose. He'll return it once the fire is out. A pleasant image for a brutal deal. Behind closed doors, Treasury Secretary Henry Morgenthau prepares the conditions. He demands transparency, complete and humiliating. Every British asset, every foreign investment, every scrap of wealth must be exposed. The message is relentless. Before receiving aid, London must strip itself bare. The British envoys can hardly believe what they hear. Never before has an ally been treated like a debtor facing bankruptcy. Yet Morgenthau follows orders. He must protect the American taxpayer, even at the cost of another nation's pride. Until Britain has proven it owns nothing left to sell, there will be no help. The breaking point arrives with the American Vice Coast Corporation. A jewel of British industry, it manufactures rayon and synthetic silk in Pennsylvania, earning millions in dividends for London each year. Under US pressure, the company is seized and sold. Worth over $100 million, it is auctioned off for nearly half that sum. The proceeds go straight to the US Treasury to settle arms orders already delivered. The humiliation is total. That single sale marks a turning point. The balance of the special relationship tilts. Britain is no longer a partner. It becomes a client. Power shifts quietly across the Atlantic, from a fading empire to a rising colossus. Meanwhile, another trade unfolds at sea. Britain pleads for old destroyers to guard the convoys strangled by German submarines. Roosevelt agrees, 50 worn-out ships, relics of the last war. In return, America demands 99-year leases on British naval bases stretching from Newfoundland to Trinidad, 50 rusted hulls in exchange for a chain of strategic outposts, a century of influence bought for the price of scrap metal. On March 11, 1941, the Lend-Lease Act becomes law. Britain gains the weapons it desperately needs, but at a cost beyond measure. An empire once rich enough to finance continents now pawns its future for survival. In the echoing corridors of Downing Street, the air feels cold and still. The victory that once seemed inevitable now carries a hidden cost. Beneath the roar of Spitfires, a quieter truth begins to grow. The British Empire has started selling itself, piece by piece, to stay alive. August 1945. Bells ring across London. Crowds flood the streets. Flags bloom like flowers after a storm. After 6 years of hell, the war is finally over. Laughter echoes off the soot-stained walls. Strangers embrace beneath the drizzle of victory. Yet even as the city rejoices, a quieter battle begins, hidden behind the cheers. Across the Atlantic in Washington, D.C., the hum of bureaucracy continues without pause. Just days after Japan's surrender, President Harry Truman signs a single, devastating order, the termination of Lend-Lease. With one stroke of a pen, Britain's lifeline is severed. Shipments of food, weapons and fuel are stopped immediately. No transition period, no warning. Cargo ships already at sea are instructed to turn back. The relief turns into disbelief. In London, the news lands like an air raid. Ministers sit frozen. John Maynard Keynes, the aging architect of modern economics, reads the figures and feels his heart drop. He knows what the end of aid means: financial starvation. Half the nation's food comes from abroad. Raw materials, fuel and grain, almost all of it, must be paid for in dollars. But the dollars are gone. Without American credit, the empire faces collapse. Keynes gathers what remains of his strength. Sick, pale, exhausted, he boards a ship to America. His mission is simple, yet impossible: to persuade the richest nation on earth to rescue the one that once ruled the seas. On the voyage to Washington, the winter wind lashes against the deck. The old economist knows he is walking into the lion's den. In meetings at the US Treasury, Keynes pleads not as an economist, but as a supplicant. He argues that Britain deserves not a loan, but a grant, a gift in recognition of 2 years of solitary sacrifice against Nazi Germany. $6 billion he proposes as repayment for the blood and treasure spent holding the line. The Americans listen in silence, faces expressionless. The answer, when it comes, has the chill of arithmetic. There will be no gift. The war is over, and the public is weary of paying for Europe's ruins. Congress fears the socialist promises of Britain's new Labour government. Generosity finds no purchase in these marble halls. Fred Vinson, the hard-faced Secretary of the Treasury, delivers the verdict: $3.75 billion, a loan with interest. Not mercy, but business. Worse still, it comes with strings, chief among them a poisonous clause: sterling convertibility. Within 1 year, the British pound must be made freely exchangeable for US dollars. To economists, the danger is obvious. Every holder of pounds across the empire will rush to trade them for gold-backed American currency. The British reserves will vanish overnight. Keynes argues, protests, pleads. He explains the trap unfolding before their eyes. But the Americans do not budge. They hold all the cards. Without their money, Britain's imports will vanish. Its factories will stand silent. Its people will starve. The loan is accepted in July 1946. Keynes returns home, defeated, his health broken. Within months, his heart gives out. Then comes the winter of 1947, the cruelest in living memory. Snow buries rail tracks, coal freezes solid, power stations shut down, cities darken, workers huddle in unheated homes, factories close their gates. In the silence, people realize that victory has brought hunger instead of comfort. The war may be over, but the struggle for survival continues. On July 15th, the deadline arrives. The British government enforces full convertibility. The result is an economic bloodletting. Across the world, nations holding sterling dump it in exchange for dollars. London's reserves drain at a terrifying pace. What was meant to last for years evaporates within weeks. After only 5, the government slams the window shut. The damage is done. The empire has been gutted by its own promise. The consequences stretch far beyond economics. Britain, once the guarantor of global order, signals retreat. In February, a secret telegram reaches the US State Department. It announces that Britain can no longer afford its commitments in Greece and Turkey. "We are finished," the message implies. The old guardian of the Mediterranean withdraws. In response, Truman acts. The Truman Doctrine is born, the policy that will define the Cold War. American troops, not British ones, will now stand against the spread of communism. Power has shifted irreversibly. London no longer guides the map of the world. Washington does. At home, reality bites hard. In 1949, the pound is devalued from $4.86 to $2.80. Overnight, the British population becomes 1/3 poorer. Imports soar in price, rationing tightens, and the dream of post-war revival turns into an age of austerity. Meanwhile, across the ocean, American industry roars. Its factories, untouched by war, now flood the market with cars, radios, and machinery. The United States becomes manufacturer to the world, while Britain struggles to rebuild an economy that survived only by selling its inheritance. The repayment of the 1946 loan spans 6 decades. Year after year, through prosperity and recession, through Thatcher and Blair, the British Treasury sends its payment across the Atlantic. Only in December 2006 does the final instalment leave London, closing a debt born from desperation. Historians would later call it the most ironic victory in modern history. Britain defeated tyranny, yet impoverished itself to do so. Its empire did not crumble under invasion or rebellion. It was sold, asset by asset, to finance survival. The gold, the bases, the industries, all transferred not by conquest, but by contract. The war that had promised freedom left behind a new hierarchy. The sun set quietly on the empire, not in battle, but in bookkeeping. In the end, the age-old master of the seas became a debtor to its ally, and the United States, without firing a shot, inherited the world. When the final check cleared in 2006, no bands played, no headlines declared closure. Yet symbolically, that moment marked the true end of an era. December 29th, 2006. The last payment leaves London. The account is empty at last. The war that began in fire and courage ends in silence and paper. Britain, once the workshop of the world, has repaid its bill for survival. The empire was not conquered, it was sold.